Welcome to Haasline Entertainment's House or Haas on Haunted Hill. It's going to be a new little thing we're going to be doing where we're going to discuss some of the macabre, some of the movies that have made horror famous, give you some little bit of tidbits and things that are going on in the movies and some of the things that are going on in today's horror genre. It's one of the largest genres, and you can tell by recent movies like Obsession, where it is the king of low budget and high revenues if you strike that pot of gold. But we're going to try to feature a film every time we come on, and this film that we're going to feature today is The Shining. We all know The Shining. It was a great story. It's a great movie. In fact, it's actually been um, not only the wonderful blockbuster, although it was started out a little bit slow, but has become an icon by Stanley Kubrick, The Shining. It was also a mini series on TV, and of course, it had a sequel called Doctor Sleep, which was the sequel to The Shining. The Shining, as we everybody knows, was written by Stephen King, and Stephen, I think, kind of wrote it. If I hear some of the lore about it, was to he's writing it about his alcoholism that he had and suffered through. But what a great story! But the story of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining and the antics that went on with Stephen King are pretty interesting. So we're not going to talk everything about The Shining, but just give you a couple tidbits of what's been going on in that movie. So the next time you watch it, you can be on the lookout. Well, Stanley Kubrick loved the story of The Shining. He's really, and if you know Stanley Kubrick, he was the kind of guy where he loved a movie or he loved the concept, but then he wanted to do his own thing with it. And certainly that got out of hand because Stephen King had written a screenplay for the movie, and Kubrick just threw it out, didn't even read it. He wrote his own screenplay for The Shining. And of course, I'm pretty sure that pissed Stephen King off right from the start. But King ultimately hated the movie and was much more pleased with the TV miniseries that came out later, um, and was certainly in love with the adaptation of Doctor Sleep, which was his sequel to the book follow-up. But anyway, just a couple things on, that I want to kind of bring out is that King, or excuse me, Kubrick, wasn't around for most of the shots that you kind of get drawn into, particularly the beginning of the film where you see Jack Torrance and his wife and Danny Torrance, played, by the way, by the wonderful, obviously, Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall, and Danny Lloyd playing Danny Torrance. Um, but he wasn't around for those scenes. You see the wonderful landscape as he's going and driving to the Overlook Hotel because he didn't like to fly. He was afraid of flying. So all that stuff was just done, um, by the second units. Um, and amazingly, there was so much footage, not only of the the second screen second unit footage, but of the entire film. Kubrick loved to take takes. I mean, he was a guy who basically would shoot 50, 60. In fact, the scene with Jack Nicholson, if you remember, where he does "Here's Johnny," that whole thing was improvised, and that whole scene there took like a month to shoot. Kubrick was famous for take after take after take. Um, but Amazingly enough, there's a couple things I think that is worth bringing out about the Kubrick film. First of all, the one of the famous pieces, and it was, I mean, obviously the hotel is just as much a character in this as the actual characters. The room 237 um, in the Timberlake Lodge, which is where that was shot, at least the exterior, doesn't really exist. It was shot in room 217. They just didn't want that to be a room where nobody would go do it. I mean, consequently, the room that now that everybody knows it was room 217, the room 217 is the one most requested. By the way, we do love the Shining, as you can see over my over this way. I've got the sign of the Overlook Hotel. A lot of great merchandise out there if you're into merchandise. We certainly have our Jack Torrance Funko Pop, and we always want to make sure that we have a key to the room 237, which we're talking about now. And when all else fails, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. But an amazing, a lot of things that Kubrick put in there to hint to different things. And of course, almost like I think like the Beatles, if you know anything about the Beatles and the fake death of Paul McCartney, I think Kubrick kind of played around with a lot of that kind of things in his films, particularly in this one. If you watch the film and you see Jack Torrance, who is interviewing for, the job of being the caretaker during the off months at the Overlook, there's a scene where he's actually reading a Playgirl magazine. Now, you would sit there, first of all, Playgirl was kind of a, you know, I don't want to say it was a controversial magazine back then, but it probably was, and it kind of suggested that maybe there was something a little funky going on with this movie and the plot, and also that we find out that Jack, due to alcoholism, is a little abusive and potentially sets up that potentially there was some sexual abuse because of him reading this Playgirl. Everything was just set up to just have talk after the movie, and for those that really get into movies and watch that stuff, have that be dripping on their brain throughout the movie. Danny Lloyd, who's the young boy in it, who has The Shining, um, he was that's the only movie he really made. So he only had it was like a one and done. And amazingly, they protected him pretty much throughout the movie. He didn't even know he was making a horror movie as a young child. In fact, there's a scene where Shelley Duvall is um, is playing is holding on to Danny after he's upset and he sees the bruises on his mother. There's actually a dummy. It's not even Danny Lloyd in it because they didn't want him to be in that emotional scene. Obviously, Danny, one of the great characters in the movie that interacts with Danny, and also, has The Shining is Scatman Crothers, who plays the chef or the head of the food department there at the hotel, and leaves in the beginning, shows them all around, and then ends up kind of, if you've seen the film, comes back at the end. But the real Danny Lloyd, who played Danny Torrance, did have a cameo in the Doctor Sleep movie, and he's in a at a baseball game, sitting in the stands. So it was kind of a nice homage to the original movie, and I think that original movie really, the Doctor Sleep movie, really gave a lot of great homages to the, to the first movie. And I enjoyed, look, pretty much, if you know me, I'm a sucker for any movie. I can go sequels, You can give me Halloween 20 and I'd still, think it was a great movie. And talking about cameos, Stephen King even has a cameo in this movie. If you see when they're in the gold room and Jack goes in there and it's all kind of a fake scene. It's kind of a playing in his head. It's kind of a ghost scene. Stephen King is playing the music conductor in the gold room, so you can kind of check that out next time you're watching it. As I already told you, Nicholson kind of improvised a lot of dialogue there, and a lot of things that I didn't realize that were going on in the film is that when you obviously if you get to the end of the film, there's winter storm, um, and all it looks incredibly. Uh, uh, you get chilled just watching it, but it really was not snow. It was I think they had like 800,000 pounds of salt come in, and styrofoam that they used to create this winter storm. Um, Shelley Duvall, who obviously plays Jack Nicholson's wife, she is actually. And I don't know if it was by design, but her and Kubrick did not have a great relationship. They kind of fought like cats and dogs, um, and uh, and they really didn't. Trying to get rid of this thing here. I apologize. All right, there we go. Apologize for that. But yeah, they fought like cats and dogs, and I think a lot of it was that Kubrick was the kind of guy that really wanted. Um, Shelley to be kind of, to be in character at all times, to be on edge. And he was just that kind of director. So, just an interesting dichotomy there of Shelley in that movie. Probably one of her greatest roles, other than playing Olive Oil, I think, in the movie Popeye. A couple of things just to leave you with is that some of that footage I was telling you in the beginning that Kubrick didn't like to do any of that second unit stuff, but they had so much extra footage. I mean, it'd be great to get a really good documentary and have some of that extra footage seen. But some of it was actually used in other movies. In fact, it was used some of that uh, footage of the mountains and everything when Jack and his family were traveling is actually used in the opening of the movie Blade Runner. You actually can see if you see the scene Jack's car in that film. So they had they had it as Hollywood does. Use everything over and over again. Um, we talked about the all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. That was not even in the book. That was just something that was written for the movie. So an amazing movie. Um, if I'm pretty sure everybody has seen it, but it's something I think it takes probably good to take another look at it. Now that you know a few things to be looking for. The other thing is that Kubrick, as I said, he always liked to have um, little Easter eggs in there. Couple of that are not necessarily found as truth, but certainly could be true. Is that you see a lot of Native American art, Native American pictures. They say that a lot of it was to remind us, or the film was actually about the genocide of Native Americans when we settled here in North America. And then another piece that's out there, if you read about Stanley Kubrick, it was that the moon landing that we had, I think 40, 50 years ago, was fake, and that Stanley Kubrick was the guy who actually filmed all of it. And you can actually see Danny Lloyd or Danny Torrance wearing an Apollo um, spaceship sweater in it, and so there's a lot of glimpses and Easter eggs towards the moon landing, and against this Native American genocide. It's a fascinating film to watch. It's one of my favorites. I saw it when it first came out, and again, if you get an opportunity to check it out and check out some of these things that I've shared with you, that's the genesis of what we're going to try to do on Haaseline's Haas on Haunted Hill, is to just share with you a few of the tidbits from the industry of what's going on with some of the great classics in horror. Um, we also, just so you know, I involved with Radiate.tv, RAYDA.tv. Go on there and check out our offerings from Pop Creature. And one of the great films we got on there right now is a short from Angelica Heimel, with the score done by my son, D. Justin Haas, the music, and would love for you to check it out, called Twice as Shy. Great movie, werewolf movie. And then also, with some of the horror genre is our great offerings from Insomnia Theater, with the great talents, narrating voice of Paul Gannis, actor Paul Gannis. Check those out, and numerous other things. We have some spiritual things you can listen to, some movies, a lot of MMA action on there. So again, radiate.tv. And we also will be, adding films, and I'll try to push them a little bit here when I'm talking about these horror movies. But we appreciate you all, and we hope that you come back and you watch. We'll try to do maybe one of these a week where we kind of capture some of the classic horror movies that are out there. Anyway, from Haaseline Entertainment, the House on Haunted Hill in room 237. Have a blessed day.